Welcome, dear dreamer, to the Scandalous historian. Let the sound of the modern world fade now. The ticking of clocks, the hum of machines, the silent pull of your schedule. Breathe in, slowly, and breathe out. Whatever the hour, whatever the day has brought you, know that you're safe here. This space is made for quiet, for drifting, for wandering through time, not racing across it. We are not here to recount history as conquest or dates on a timeline. No heroes, no headlines, just lives. Small, quiet lives, so distant from ours they might as well belong to the stars. Tonight, we travel eastward, far across oceans and deserts, then backward, far backward, not centuries but millennia. Our destination is the cradle of cities, the land between rivers, Mesopotamia, and nestled within that landscape we find Babylon. Now, Babylon is a name that echoes. You've likely heard it before, in stories, in scripture, in song, often as a symbol of decadence, of sin, of splendor, of pride. But the real Babylon is softer, dustier, more human. This is not the Babylon of legends, of gardens hanging from palace walls or towers scraping heaven's edge. This is not the Babylon of prophecies or downfall. This is the Babylon of back-breaking routine, of barley porridge and bureaucratic scrolls, of clay tablets stored in reed baskets, of quiet corners and hot courtyards, and walls that slowly crumble in the sun. And in this version of Babylon, the real one, the daily one, you would not last. Not because it is cruel, but because it is exacting. Because it demands from you something modern life has slowly eroded: patience. Life in ancient Babylon was not built on comfort. It was built on rhythms. Stone against grain, sandal against earth. The same story told, the same prayer recited, the same signs etched in clay over and over again. It was a world where the future was not predicted by science, but read in the entrails of animals and the flickering of flames. A world where scribes held more power than soldiers, where the gods did not merely exist in temples, they governed your contract disputes and your crop rotations. And so tonight, we step into that world. We begin not with kings or temples, but with the ordinary. A day in the life of a Babylonian citizen, not a general, not a ruler, not a god-king, but someone whose name history never recorded. A young man, perhaps, apprenticed to a scribe, or a daughter grinding grain at dawn. Someone who lived not for glory, but survival. Let's imagine now. Your eyes open. The day begins. You awaken before the sun. There is no gentle alarm, no curtain to draw back, just the gradual brightening of the sky above and the slow change in the sounds around you. You're sleeping in a long, narrow room, shared with several members of your extended family, cousins, an aunt, your youngest brother curled beside your leg. Everyone here breathes in a quiet rhythm, save for your uncle, whose snore rolls from the corner like a wheezing millstone. The walls are made of mud brick coated with clay, the surface rough but worn smooth with time. The scent of the room is earthy, heat, trapped in clay, mingled with ash and the faint tang of oil. Your mat, woven from reeds, has softened beneath you over time. You keep your cloth blanket folded beneath your shoulder more out of habit than need. The night was warm. You rise slowly, stepping carefully to avoid waking others. The packed earth floor is cool on your feet. As you slide the reed mat aside and step into the courtyard, the air greets you like a thick fabric, warm, dry, already pulsing with the heat to come. This is your home. Not grand, not poor. A courtyard dwelling in one of Babylon's countless lanes. The walls, uneven in height, are patched with new clay in places where the old has crumbled. Palm trunks support the upper story, a storeroom and perhaps a second sleeping chamber used in cooler months. Chickens scurry across the yard, pecking at spilled grain. One hops onto a cracked pot and cackles at nothing. A goat tied near the door flicks its tail lazily. The courtyard is framed by low brick walls on all sides, casting long shadows on the floor. A fig tree leans inward from a neighbor's house. Its leaves move just barely in the dry morning breeze. Your mother is awake, already at work. She kneels beside a grinding stone, large, oval, shaped like a shallow bowl, and moves a smaller handstone across it in smooth, practiced strokes. Grain spills around her hands in a fine, golden dust. Her arms move with the rhythm of long habit, push forward, pull back, push forward, pull back. She does not speak. There is no need to. A small fire burns low in the cooking corner. The heat of it seeps into the courtyard despite the hour. A flatbread has already begun to bake, laid atop a convex griddle, the edges bubbling slightly as the dough stiffens. You wash your face with a small scoop of water drawn from the household jar. The water is not cold. It never is. It has been sitting overnight, sealed beneath a cloth, kept in the shade. You splash it onto your face with both hands, inhaling the scent, faint, musty, with the barest trace of the clay vessel that held it. And now, you eat. There is no table, no plates, just food. Bread, dark and dense, pulled from the fire, still warm. A smear of lentil paste spiced with crushed garlic. A slice of date if there are some in season. A cup of beer, not the beer you know, but thick, fermented, opaque. It is drunk with a straw to filter out the solids. It nourishes. It fills. There is no discussion of plans, no calendar. You do not check your schedule. The day is known before it begins. You are a tupsharu in training, a scribal apprentice. You rise, stretch your legs, and gather your stylus. A simple reed shaped with a sharp edge. You wrap your tunic around you, woolen, undyed, stiff with the dust of countless days. You pull your belt tight, and then, barefoot or sandaled, you walk into the city. The streets are narrow, uneven. The ground beneath you is hardened soil and old stone, littered with pebbles, discarded fiber, patches of animal droppings that have dried to dust and been swept to the sides. The air smells of old fires, human sweat, and dung. Sometimes sweet, when a bread seller opens his clay oven. Sometimes sharp, when the butcher rinses his knives in the alley basin. Vendors are already unrolling their mats. One pours dates into a shallow tray. Another lines up jars of oil, checking each seal with a quiet tap. A man sits on a crate, preparing onions. He does not look up as you pass. You move past homes similar to yours. Mud brick walls rising high and plain. Windows small and few. There is no architectural flourish, no facade. Privacy is everything. The public face of a home is silence. Still, from within, you hear sounds. A child crying. A woman scolding. The soft notes of a reed flute drifting through a rooftop vent. Someone is chanting a prayer beneath their breath. You approach the scribal quarter, one of many across the city. This one is part of the temple complex, near the ziggurat, whose massive tiered silhouette rises in the distance like a petrified mountain. Its flanks are scorched with sun, its surface pocked with age. Even now, priests walk its lower steps, whispering hymns to Marduk. You will not go that high, not yet. You enter the scribal chamber. It is dark inside, cool. Shelves along the wall hold clay tablets, fresh and dried. Some wrapped in cloth, others cracked. They smell of earth, damp, bitter, honest. You know them well. You sit cross-legged before your table. There is no desk, just a broad stone slab, smooth and slightly concave, like a well-used cutting board. Your stylus rests beside a flattened mound of clay, carefully prepared by an assistant before your arrival. Its surface glistens slightly in the morning light. And now, you begin. You copy the same symbols you practiced yesterday and the day before. Names, titles, numbers, measures, curses, blessings, receipts. You are not composing poetry. You are not telling stories. You are recording. An old man beside you recites the list aloud as you follow along. 5 baskets of barley, 2 goats, 1 jug of oil, delivered to the temple storehouse. Overseer, Namtar. Witnesses, Enlilbani, Namtilla. The stylus moves with precision. Each wedge-shaped impression must be correct. The orientation, the depth, the angle. A single misplaced mark could transform debt paid into debt owed. The hours pass, slowly, quietly. No one speaks unless necessary. The only sound is the soft clicking of stylus on clay, and the occasional scrape of sandals across the floor as a messenger arrives with a new order. Eventually, the sun shifts. The light enters from the opposite side. The heat intensifies, bleeding through the walls like warm breath. There is a pause. Lunch. The servant brings bread, lentils, more beer. You eat slowly, seated in the shade of a carved column, legs stretched before you. You do not speak. You chew. You breathe. Then you return. The tablet you complete is placed gently on a rack. A tag is attached, naming the scribe, the date, the content. It will be stored in the archive, one of hundreds just like it. A contract of grain, a list of tools, a record of the life of this city, reduced to lines on clay. But each mark is lasting. The afternoon wears on and the scribal room grows quieter. Not because there are fewer people, but because exhaustion settles over the work like a fine mist. The heat presses in now, fully awake. It comes not in waves, but in stillness, a thick, unmoving air that wraps itself around your arms, your face, the back of your neck. You feel it cling to the clay, softening the tablets if left too long in the sun. The stylus grows a little slippery in your hand. You wipe it absently on your tunic and carry on. There is a moment when the master calls for you. An older man, wrapped in a linen shawl, stands in the doorway. His posture is precise, but there's something weary in his expression. He gestures you forward. Together you walk to his client. A merchant, perhaps, or a landowner, seated beneath an awning in a private courtyard. He speaks softly, with the careful rhythm of someone accustomed to being recorded. He tells of a transaction, a field sold, a price agreed, a witness present. The master scribe nods occasionally, never interrupting. You are not here to negotiate. You are here to inscribe. You press a fresh clay tablet into your palm, shaping it carefully. You smooth its surface with a damp cloth, then hold it against your thigh as you begin to write. Names first. Always names. Then titles. Relationships. Then the transaction itself. Short, formulaic, but complete. Then the conditions. Then the penalties. And at the end, the seal. The merchant unrolls a cylinder seal from a cord around his neck. It is carved with images: a lion, a cypress tree, a man in a horned crown. He presses it carefully into the wet clay, rolling it from edge to edge. The result is perfect. The master nods. The deal is done. Later, the tablet will dry. Perhaps it will be baked if it is important. Perhaps not. It will be stored with the others. You return to your work with the feeling that something final has occurred. Not dramatic, but meaningful. As the sun lowers toward the western edge of the sky, the world shifts again. The city does not grow dark, but golden. The walls of the buildings, once brown and dusty, take on a soft glow. The streets quiet slightly, not from sleep, but from transition. Vendors pack up their baskets. Children return home, laughing and shouting, their bare feet slapping against the warm ground. A priest leads a group of temple servants in a procession, chanting a hymn in a language older than your grandfather's memory. And you walk home. There is no rush. The heat is retreating now, and with it comes a softness. The dust of the day settles gently back into its place. You pass familiar doorways, where families are gathering for the evening meal. There is the smell of meat, goat perhaps or pigeon, cooked with garlic and onion. The scent is sharp, savory, irresistible. Your own home awaits you. The courtyard glows faintly with the last of the sun. A clay lamp is lit, its wick bobbing in oil. Your mother is seated on a low stool, fanning the fire. Your brother pokes lazily at the coals with a stick. Your father speaks with a neighbor about a broken irrigation ditch. No one is in a hurry. You wash your hands and sit. The meal is simple. Bread again, flat, a little burnt around the edges. A stew, thick and brown, made with lentils and leeks. A few dates, soft and sticky. A small cup of beer, cooler than in the morning, but still earthy. You eat with your fingers, quietly. No one lectures. No one argues. There is only the sound of chewing, of the fire, of a dog barking somewhere down the lane. Afterward, your grandmother begins to speak. She sits on a mat, legs folded beneath her, her hands moving as she speaks, not dramatically, but rhythmically. The story is familiar. You've heard it dozens of times. Still, you listen. She tells of the flood that covered the earth, of the god Enki who whispered secrets into reeds, of the man who built a boat and carried the seeds of all life within it. She speaks of Gilgamesh, the king who feared death, who wandered the world to find the secret of eternal life and came home with only a story. She speaks of Inanna, who descended into the underworld, naked and unafraid, and rose again in triumph. These stories are not bedtime tales. They are memory. They are truth, in a way that transcends fact. You lie back on your mat and stare at the ceiling. Just a lattice of beams, and above it, the dim stars beginning to appear through the open air. The night is warm. The city is settling. Someone nearby is singing. A lullaby, low and slow. A baby cries once, then quiets. And you begin to drift. Your body aches, a little. Your fingers are stained with clay, your back is stiff, but you are content. You have done what was expected. You have fulfilled your role. There will be more days like this. Many more. Perhaps all the days of your life. The thought is not frightening. There is comfort in repetition, in knowing your place, in the soft, steady rhythm of the world. You do not dream of escape. You dream, perhaps, of cooler weather, of better grain next season, of learning to read the sky as the priests do. Or perhaps you do not dream at all, because even in sleep the rhythm continues, and so the day ends, not with closure, not with excitement, but with stillness. A life not of glory, but of quiet purpose. And somewhere, beneath the ziggurat, a priest records the phase of the moon on a damp tablet. In another corner of the city, a child falls asleep clutching a clay amulet shaped like a lion. The stars watch, the city breathes. And Babylon, ancient and eternal, moves gently into night. And yet, even in the stillness of the evening, Babylon never truly sleeps. Your house may quiet, the courtyard may dim, the coals may cool, but somewhere, always somewhere, the city stirs. In the temple precincts, night rites begin. Priests, dressed in white linen robes, climb the narrow stairs of the ziggurat, bearing incense and oil. Their voices do not rise, but fall in murmurs. Recitations of prayers, invocations to the gods whose presence, while unseen, is everywhere implied. To sleep in Babylon is to sleep under divine scrutiny. Munch it before you lay down. Your mother sprinkled a line of salt across the threshold. Not much, just enough to signal to wandering spirits that they are not welcome. Your grandmother pressed a small amulet into your palm, a carved piece of clay shaped like the scorpion goddess, meant to protect against fever and bad dreams. You clutched it tightly for a moment before placing it beside your mat. It is not superstition, not exactly. It is the structure of things. Just as a tablet records the delivery of grain, a line of salt records your intent to keep danger out. The world is layered with meaning. Every action, however small, connects to something larger. As you lie on your mat, staring up at the beams of the ceiling and the stars beyond, you hear the last sounds of the day fading. A child's giggle from across the alley, a dog's growl, the splash of water in a distant basin. Then, stillness. The walls around you are not thick, but they are old. They remember things. You drift into sleep as the fire dies, your breath sinking with the rhythm of those around you. And when you wake, it begins again. The next morning arrives, not as a surprise, but as a return. The city breathes in cycles, and you rise into the same familiar warmth. But today, as your feet find the cool floor and you step into the courtyard, something is different. A neighbor stands at the doorway, speaking softly with your father. His posture is low, his voice serious. You listen as you eat, bread again, today with a smear of goat cheese. The beer has fermented a bit too long. It's sourer than usual, but still nourishing. The neighbor's wife has fallen ill. They think it may be the hand of the ghost, an invisible force, a presence that cannot be named. She is feverish, muttering strange words, refusing food. No one says the word demon, but everyone thinks it. After breakfast, instead of heading straight to the scribal house, your father brings you to the temple district. The temple of Gula, goddess of healing, is already busy. Families line the outer courtyard holding offerings: barley, onions, bread shaped in the form of ears and mouths, ritual gifts meant to restore the senses. You wait with your father, watching as a priest, his face lined and calm, emerges from the sanctum. He wears a badge of hammered copper and carries a bundle of reeds soaked in water. He dips the reeds into a clay bowl and flicks the water across each petitioner. A purification rite. The droplets glisten in the sunlight as they fall onto skin, stone, clay. Some close their eyes, others weep. Your father presents the name of the neighbor's wife, written on a small tablet by her eldest son. The priest reads it quickly, mouth moving silently, then nods. Hadaya. An offering is accepted. A prayer is murmured. The tablet is placed in a niche among hundreds of others. The ceremony is short, quiet, but heavy with meaning. You walk back in silence. Even in a world so structured, so defined by record-keeping, some things cannot be explained. Illness, madness, dreams that come true. These things are the work of gods and spirits. And so they are written, not in ledgers, but in prayer. You arrive late to the scribal house, but no one rebukes you. The master only gestures to your station. Today's lesson is more advanced. You are given a tablet covered with old text, someone else's writing. A contract, perhaps 20 years old. The surface is cracked, but still legible. Your task is not just to copy, but to understand. You must translate the signs into modern Akkadian and annotate any that are obsolete. Some terms, like old tax codes or legal titles, have fallen out of use. Others are sacred and cannot be changed. You recognize the name of a king long dead. You wonder, briefly, what kind of man he was. Whether he built roads or tore them down. Whether he feared his gods. Whether he feared death. You think of your neighbor's wife. There are thousands of these tablets, each a fragment of a life. Most record nothing extraordinary. Barley shipments, rental agreements, marriage contracts, a woman pledging to repay a debt with labor, a man promising to deliver firewood by the next full moon. These are the building blocks of civilization. Small, precise, unremarkable, but together they sustain the city. You work slowly, carefully, stopping now and then to stretch your fingers. At midday, you rest under the shade of a fig tree near the water gate. A passing priest blesses a jug of oil being delivered to the temple. A fish seller shouts his prices without much enthusiasm. You bite into a boiled egg, sprinkled with salt, and chew it thoughtfully. Gamda, and then you return. The afternoon is spent in dictation. An elder scribe recites an old hymn in Sumerian, a language no longer spoken in the streets, but preserved in temples and legal forms. You struggle to follow the grammar, the unusual verb forms. Still, you write. The hymn is to Ninurta, a god of war and irrigation. The two seem incompatible, but in Babylon, they are often the same. The one who destroys is also the one who restores. The final lines are beautiful, though you do not fully understand them. May the canals run full, may the plow sink deep, may your name be carved in water and in stone. You pause after writing those words. You read them again. You feel something. Not awe, not quite, but a kind of alignment. As if the world has, for a moment, settled into place. That evening, the household is quieter. News has spread. Another neighbor has taken ill. The same symptoms. There is tension now in the way your father paces, the way your mother double-checks the seals on the water jars, the way your grandmother sprinkles a few more protective herbs near the doorway. You eat together, but no one speaks. And then, unexpectedly, your uncle begins to chant. He was once a temple servant, long ago. He knows the old words. He sings a lullaby to Gula, the healing goddess, his voice gravelly and low. It is not beautiful, but it is powerful. Dot. The flames flicker in the oil lamp. The shadows stretch across the wall. And you listen, lying on your mat, eyes open to the dark. When he finishes, no one applauds. No one even speaks. It is enough that it was said. Later you dream. You are walking through the alleys of the city, but they are empty. No sound. No color. Only dust. You follow a trail of clay tablets, each cracked and glowing faintly. You pick one up. It bears your name, but you don't remember writing it. You look around and the city begins to fade. And you wake. Another day. The same. You are sore. Your eyes are dry. But you rise. The courtyard is already warm. Your mother grinding grain. Your father speaking quietly with the neighbor. Your grandmother still asleep, wrapped tightly in her shawl. By Nitulap, you wash, eat, dress, and return to the dust, to the clay, to the rhythm. This is life in ancient Babylon. Not brutal, not tragic, but relentless. And now you begin to understand why you wouldn't last. Because here, everything matters. Every moment, every motion, every sound. There is no privacy, no pause, no solitude that is not earned. But there is purpose. There is rhythm. And for those who can withstand it, there is meaning. Here, in the quiet turning of days, Babylon endures. The city is waking again. You can hear it even before the first light touches the rooftops. The slow stirring of clay and breath, the distant slap of sandals on dust, the low, rhythmical groan of a grinding stone beginning its morning work. But this day, our journey will not follow the apprentice through the streets of Babylon. Today, we walk instead into the palace, into silence, into stone. Imagine a room. Imagine a room. Not large, but deliberate. Its walls are thick, holding in the coolness of the night. Lamps gutter gently against carved niches. A copper basin of water reflects the ceiling beams, and in the center, seated at a low table, is a man. He is not young, but he is not old. His beard is neatly trimmed. His robe is fine, though not adorned. His eyes are sharp. His name is Hammurabi. If you know him at all, it is perhaps as the man of laws, the one who wrote the code, the king who gave order, the ancient name in a textbook or a museum placard. But he was more than that. He was not born a legend. He did not inherit an empire. He began with very little. And what he built, he did slowly, quietly, carefully, not by glory, but by understanding. To understand Hammurabi, we must first understand the world he inherited. The year is around 1792 BCE. The region we now call Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and the Euphrates, is not a unified land. It is a patchwork of city-states, each with its own ruler. its own god, its own ambitions. Babylon, at this time, is not yet a jewel, not yet a capital. It is a modest city, nestled between more powerful neighbors. To the south, Larsa dominates trade along the canals. To the northeast, Eshnunna controls fertile lands. Farther north, Assyria watches. And beyond them all, the looming presence of Elam, distant but never fully forgotten. Hammurabi's father, Sin-Meballit, was king of Babylon before him. A capable man, but not ambitious. Under his rule, Babylon survived, but it did not shine. Hammurabi ascended the throne in his father's place, not as a conqueror, but as a caretaker. And he waited. For the first 10 years of his reign, there were few records of conquest or expansion. Instead, he focused on things others ignored. He repaired canals, strengthened walls, invested in temples, reformed weights and measures, inspected granaries. He visited provinces that previous kings had ruled from afar. He walked among scribes. He met with priests. He listened. This was not passivity. It was strategy, because the king understood something fundamental. Before one can take power, one must understand where it leaks. So he studied his rivals. Larsa and Eshnunna were growing tense, their trade routes increasingly disrupted. Mari, an influential city far to the northwest, was in the midst of political instability. And to the southeast, Elamite kings threatened but rarely acted. Hammurabi saw not a battlefield, but a board. And then, when the time was right, he moved. The first strike came quietly. A disputed canal along the border with Larsa. Nothing unusual, but Hammurabi used the moment to shift soldiers into position, not as invaders, but as protectors. When Larsa responded with force, he had what he needed: a justification, a story. And it wasn't massive. It didn't need to be. Hammurabi had allies, cities tired of Larsa's taxes, priests offended by Larsa's kings interfering with ritual law. When Larsa fell, it didn't collapse. It bent toward Babylon. And from there, the dominoes began to fall. One by one, the cities of the south, Isin, Uruk, Ur, joined his growing coalition. Some resisted, others aligned. But each time, Hammurabi came not merely as a conqueror, but as a restorer. He spoke of justice, of rightful order, of the gods' approval. He was not the first to use religion for politics, but he was one of the first to do so with such patience. He never claimed divinity for himself, as some rulers did. He remained a man, but a man touched by the gods, guided by Marduk, Babylon's patron deity, protected by Shamash, the god of justice. And it was in Shamash's name that Hammurabi would inscribe his most famous act, the Code. That is how we remember him. But what was it? To hold the black basalt stele today in a museum is to hold something that feels final. But it was never final. It was a moment, a snapshot of a system in motion. The code is long, over 280 legal clauses written in dense Akkadian cuneiform. But it is not exhaustive. Not all laws are there, and not all situations are addressed asravai. Instead, it is a framework, a kind of legal poetry. If a man, then. If a builder constructs a house, and the house collapses. If a wife is found in the company of another man. If a son strikes his father. It does not ask why. It does not dwell on emotion. It offers a system of consequences, of balance. It differentiates by class, the awilu, the freeman, the mushkinu, the commoner, the wardu, the slave. Punishments are not uniform. They are calibrated. Is it fair? By our standards, perhaps not. But fairness was not the aim. Stability was. And the laws were not hidden. The stele was displayed publicly in the temple courtyard. Most people couldn't read them, but they could see them, touch them, know that the law existed. Even now, carved into stone, at the top of the stele there is an image. Hammurabi stands. Before him, the god Shamash is seated, rays emerging from his shoulders. He hands the king a rod and a ring, symbols of measurement and order. This is not a gesture of invention. It is one of transmission. Hammurabi is not writing the law. He is receiving it. He is the conduit, the voice, the servant. This image matters because it shaped how people saw their king, not as a man of whim, but as a man bound to cosmic justice. And so even as his empire grew, even as his armies moved from city to city, Hammurabi maintained this image. Not of glory, but of duty. He was the king who kept the scales level. But even order has its costs. In his later years, Hammurabi turned north. Eshnunna had grown wealthy on trade, its caravans carrying lapis lazuli, copper, timber, grain. But its alliances were fragile. Hammurabi moved against it in stages, first isolating its allies, then seizing its supply routes, and finally, in a brief but decisive campaign, taking the city itself. Assyria followed, not conquered outright, but brought to heel. Its king reduced to a vassal, its temples required to acknowledge Babylon's superiority. Mari, too, eventually fell, though not through war, but alliance, then betrayal. And in this way, Babylon became not just a city, but a center, a hub, a capital. It had temples to all the major gods, ziggurats rivaling those of ancient Sumer, archives, palaces, granaries, a port along the river. It grew in size and splendor and in importance. And Hammurabi, once a local ruler with a minor crown, now held dominion over nearly all of Mesopotamia. He reigned for over 40 years. But by the end of his rule, he had established Babylon as the dominant force in the region. Not just militarily, but administratively, spiritually, architecturally. He had not only conquered land, he had reordered how people thought about law, about kingship, about the role of the state in daily life. And yet, the empire did not last. His son Samsu-iluna inherited a kingdom too vast to govern with the same attention to detail. Rebellions broke out in the south. Cities like Ur and Isin declared independence. Trade routes fractured. Temples, once allied with Babylon, reasserted their autonomy. Within decades, the borders shrank. The central authority weakened. The system Hammurabi had so carefully built, based on loyalty, ritual, and law, began to strain. And so, the man who had seemed to stabilize the known world became a memory. For centuries, he was forgotten. His stele, once displayed in public, was taken, captured during a later invasion and carried far away to Susa, in Elam. There it was buried beneath the ruins of another empire. It remained hidden for over 3,000 years. When it was rediscovered in 1901, the words carved into it still spoke, still told of laws, still whispered of balance, still carried the voice of a king who had once ruled without shouting. Now, let us pause. Let the weight of time settle. Hammurabi was not a god. He did not claim immortality. But in writing law, he found a different kind of legacy. Not one of conquest, but of consequence. His world is gone. The cities he ruled are dust, the borders he drew, erased by centuries. The ziggurats he commissioned lie in ruin. But the law, the idea that authority is accountable, that actions have predictable outcomes, that justice is a structure, it remains. Not unchanged, but remembered. And so, you see him now not as a statue, not as a name carved in stone, but as a man who listened, who waited, who understood the rhythm of the world around him, and who, for a little while, shaped it. Hammurabi did not ride through the streets with a golden chariot. His power was not displayed in bursts of celebration or thunderous proclamations. He governed with gestures, with processions that unfolded like ceremonies, with quiet meetings in shaded courtyards, with long silences between decisions. The strength of his rule did not lie in spectacle, but in memory. He was not a king who made you feel fear. He was a king who made you feel watched. Not personally, but systemically, thoroughly. To live under Hammurabi's rule was to understand that somewhere a record was being kept. Somewhere your name had been written. Somewhere a scribe had documented what you swore, what you promised, what you paid. And somewhere the gods had witnessed it. This idea, this convergence of divine presence and bureaucratic order, was not accidental. It was his design. Hammurabi's true genius was not in conquest, but in building belief. Not in the gods, for those were already long believed, but in the system. He replaced chaos with procedure. In an age when famine, disease, and flood were ever-present threats, this mattered. The people of Babylon did not need a king who could promise prosperity. They needed one who could explain loss, who could give shape to suffering, who could describe, in precise legal terms, what would happen when something went wrong, and what would be done to make it right. That is what his code gave them. To the modern ear, Hammurabi's laws may sound harsh, and they were. There were penalties of death, of disfigurement. There were unequal punishments for the same crime, depending on the class of the offender and the victim. But these were not simply laws. They were expressions of balance in a world that felt deeply unstable. They spoke the language of equivalence. Not mercy, but measure. If a man breaks another man's bone, his own shall be broken. If a merchant loans silver and is not repaid, the borrower shall pay triple in restitution. If a woman's husband leaves for war and she takes another man, she shall be thrown into the river. Unless the first husband is proven dead, then she is blameless. These are not modern standards. They are not modern values, but they are precise. And precision, more than fairness, is what kept Babylon functioning. Even more telling are the laws that deal with neglect, with failure of responsibility. If a builder constructs a house and it collapses and kills the owner, the builder shall be put to death. If the collapse kills the owner's son, the builder's son shall die. If a shepherd fails to guard the flock and loses sheep, he must restore them tenfold. These are not just rules, they are moral architecture. They define the sacred nature of labor, of trust, of role. And for those who followed them, those who kept the system moving, life in Babylon could be surprisingly stable. Beyond the laws, Hammurabi built more than courts and palaces. He ordered the construction of temples across the land, not just in Babylon, but in the cities he absorbed. Eridu, Nippur, Sippur. Each received attention. Each was brought into the orbit of his rule not by force alone, but by ritual inclusion. He honored their local gods. He restored shrines desecrated during warfare. He offered gold and incense and ceremonial vessels. These acts were not generosity, they were calculated affirmations. Each offering whispered the same message. I see your God. I respect your tradition. But I rule now. Who tain on Wylasi. He also issued edicts to relieve debt. This, too, was not pure benevolence. In times of hardship, after floods or droughts, many farmers fell into debt. When they could not repay, their children, or even they themselves, might be taken as debt servants. Too much of this, and the system collapsed. The land would lie fallow, the temples would lose their tithes, trade would stall. So, at intervals, Hammurabi declared general amnesties. Debt tablets were broken, servants were released, fields returned to their owners, the slate was wiped clean. Not always, but often enough to restore confidence, often enough to reset the rhythm. These proclamations were delivered with ritual, a public reading, a ceremony, priests in attendance, drums and bells. The people would gather, and they would remember that Babylon could renew itself, that Hammurabi could give not just law, but forgiveness. But even in strength, there were cracks. There are letters preserved on tablets that speak of disputes between Hammurabi and his governors, of tensions between the temple priesthood and the king's scribes, of rival cities that bent but did not truly submit. In one letter, a provincial governor complains of grain shortages, warning that temple granaries are being raided by starving locals. Another tablet records the trial of a corrupt tax collector, a man who pocketed temple offerings and falsified records. Hammurabi was not blind to these flaws, but he could not be everywhere. His network of scribes and messengers, though remarkable, had limits. Messages sent by foot or boat could take days, even weeks, and time was not always on his side. As he aged, his movements slowed. The campaigns that had once brought cities to their knees gave way to diplomacy, to delegation. His advisors grew bolder, his generals more autonomous. He relied increasingly on ritual. A new temple was constructed in Babylon itself, dedicated to Marduk. Its inauguration lasted 10 days. Priests paraded through the streets with sacred statues. Musicians played lutes and lyres. Incense filled the city. But behind the scenes, the outer provinces were straining. Rebellions simmered in the south. Elamite raids increased along the eastern borders. And yet, Babylon held. For a while. Hammurabi's death was not recorded in drama. No inscription tells of his final day. We do not know what he said, if anything, to his son, but we know what he left behind. His successor, Samsu-Iluna, inherited a kingdom immense in reach, but fragile. The alliances his father had so carefully built began to fray almost immediately. Uruk declared independence. The south erupted in revolts. Trade routes were disrupted. The temples, now flush with wealth and wary of central authority, began to resist royal decrees. And with that unraveling came something almost worse than rebellion: forgetting. Over the next generation, Hammurabi's name faded from the outer cities, not in hatred, simply in silence. In Nippur, priests returned to their old rituals. In Larsa, local kings reasserted their ancestral claims. The law stele, so carefully carved, so prominently displayed, was taken, moved, hidden. Centuries passed. The clay tablets of his scribes were buried under new archives. New rulers rose, new gods were favored. And Hammurabi became what he never claimed to be, a myth. Until one day, he was found again. In the year 1901, French archaeologists working in Susa uncovered a black basalt pillar, broken in 3 pieces. Its surface was inscribed with lines of text, thousands of wedge-shaped signs. They did not know at first what they had discovered. But as the signs were translated, the voice that had slept for 30 centuries began to speak again. I, Hammurabi, the king who made justice prevail in the land, who brought the wicked to account and the weak to shelter, who rose like the sun over Babylon. It was not a boast, it was a vision. A vision of law, of order, of meaning. Not because it was perfect, not because it was fair, but because it endured. Now let us sit with that silence. In a room of clay and firelight, you imagine the king again. Not as a legend, but as a man seated before a scribe, dictating one more clause. He pauses between sentences, sips water from a bronze cup, taps the table once with his finger, thinks, and speaks. And the scribe writes, wedges in clay, the shape of law, the rhythm of a world that would be lost and then found again. And you sit beside them, quiet, listening, not judging, just listening. There is a river, slow and deep, running past the city of Babylon. It moves in loops and bends, patient and unbothered by time. The waters do not hurry. They seep into the fields, pulled into irrigation ditches dug by hand. They nourish crops of barley, plots of onions, groves of dates. They sustain the life that clusters near its banks. The Euphrates, they called it, a god in the shape of a river. And like the river, Hammurabi's rise was not sudden. It curved, it studied the terrain, it waited for its moment. When it came, it did not roar, it spread. If you were to stand in the marketplace in Babylon around 1792 BCE, the year Hammurabi inherited the throne, you would not have seen an empire. You would have seen a city like any other. Mud brick homes, narrow streets, a ziggurat on the horizon. Merchants shouting, priests whispering, scribes pressing styluses into clay, the hum of work, the weight of heat. Babylon was not the center of the world then, not even close. It was a modest city, independent but vulnerable, flanked by stronger, older powers. Larsa to the south, Ashur to the north, Elam to the east, and the merchant city of Eshnunna to the northeast. It was one tile on a crowded board. And yet, in Hammurabi's eyes, it was enough. He came to the throne not as a warrior, but as a manager. The documents from his early reign do not mention conquest. They speak of canal repair, of fair wages, of land grants to loyal officials. He reorganized temple personnel, resurveyed boundaries. He stabilized silver prices. He reissued measurements. He fixed things. Meramec, where other kings boasted of slaying enemies, Hammurabi wrote of provisioning grain to the poor. Ka, where others built monuments to themselves, he built systems. He was first and foremost a planner. And in that quiet, administrative patience was something far more dangerous than ambition. There was intent. He watched. He watched as Larsa, under King Rimsin, grew wealthy and arrogant. Watched as Rimsin's tax collectors grew more oppressive. Watched the smaller cities begin to resent their southern overlord. He watched Eshnuna expand its control over trade routes and demanded tribute from the highland cities. He watched Assyria, still fractured, fail to respond. And he watched as the gods were used by his rivals not as guides, but as justifications. And so Hammurabi, king of Babylon, protector of Marduk, son of Sin-Muballit, began to write not only laws, but narratives. He sent letters, gifts, promises. To Lagash, he promised protection. To Uruk, he pledged recognition of their goddess. To Marie, he offered a marriage alliance. To the cities of the lower canals, he promised relief from Larsa's tariffs. Day. It was not yet war. It was arrangement. It was anticipation. And when the pieces were in place, Hammurabi moved. The conflict with Larsa did not begin with a battle. It began with a canal. In Mesopotamia, water was power. More than gold, more than land, more than soldiers. If you controlled the flow of water, you controlled the flow of everything else. You could make land fertile or barren. You could open trade or cut it off. You could reward allies with irrigation or punish them with drought. So when a border canal between Larsa and Babylon became the subject of dispute, it was not a minor matter. It was a declaration in miniature. The records describe it dryly. Canal maintenance delayed, workmen denied passage, boundary stones moved. But beneath those phrases lies strategy. Hammurabi framed his movements not as offense, but as obligation. He was protecting shared water, defending the righteous, preserving peace. And so when he sent his troops to secure the canal and garrison the nearby town, he claimed no war, only stewardship. It was Larsa that struck first, at least in appearance. And Hammurabi, now justified, now vindicated, responded. He moved quickly, but not with overwhelming force. Instead, he called on allies. Cities he had courted, temples he had funded, governors he had honored, and they answered. Together, they marched on Larsa. They disrupted supply routes. They bypassed the walls. They occupied the farmland. They outweighted the enemy. When Rimsin's army finally emerged to engage, it was already too late. The decisive blow was not a great battle. It was a siege. Larsa surrendered under starvation. There are no grand accounts of Hammurabi's entry into the city. No surviving hymn, no mosaic, only a brief record. The king entered Larsa. He restored the temple of Shamash. He forgave the debts of the people. It was not conquest. It was reordering. Hammurabi's pattern was set. After Larsa came Eshnuna. This time, the pretext was different. Banditry along trade routes, complaints from caravan leaders, suspicion of alliance with Elam. Hammurabi once again moved deliberately. He issued warnings. He summoned envoys. He conducted ritual inquiries. And then he struck. Eshnuna, prosperous but complacent, was unprepared for the discipline of Babylonian campaign tactics. Hammurabi's troops moved through river corridors. They disrupted the harvest. They seized key storehouses. By the time they reached the city gates, resistance had eroded from within. Eshnuna was absorbed. Mesach, its archives were preserved, its temples rededicated, its local deities were honored, but subordinated to Marduk. The gods shifted, subtly. And then came Mari. Mari, a city of diplomacy, of long halls and tall walls, a center of correspondence. For a time, Mari was Hammurabi's ally. Its king, Zimri-Lim, ruled with his own ambitions, his own networks. He and Hammurabi exchanged gifts. They shared intelligence. They toasted agreements. But over time, that relationship strained. Zimri-Lim's control over northern trade had grown. His loyalty had waned. Letters between the two rulers became formal, then distant, then ceased. The exact cause of the rupture is unclear. But Hammurabi moved without hesitation. Mari was taken. Not through betrayal, not through brute force, but through a kind of precision. Armies positioned carefully, allies turned quietly. Defenders delayed just long enough. The palace was entered, its archive uncovered. Tens of thousands of tablets, letters, inventories, instructions, petitions, orders from queens, reports from governors, notes on gifts, marriages, spies, dreams, the whole nervous system of a kingdom laid bare. And Hammurabi read it all. He now knew not only how cities operated, but how they felt, what they feared, who they trusted, who they hated. It was not power through fire, it was power through knowledge. By the time Hammurabi reached the height of his power, Babylon was no longer a peer among cities. It was the axis, the center to which all else was now tethered by tribute, by law, by fear, by shared ritual. What had once been a patchwork of rival kings and regional gods was now a system. A slow, deliberate system, one that revolved around a single man, one that bore the image of stability, even as its weight grew harder to carry. A cacophony. This is the part of the story where most versions stop. The victorious king, the unifier, the lawgiver, the founder of a tradition that would echo across millennia. And in a way, it's not wrong, but it is incomplete. Because what came next was not peace. It was balance. And balance, by its nature, is delicate. Let us pause here. Let us imagine that you were in Babylon at this moment. Perhaps not in the palace, but nearby. Perhaps a merchant, or a scribe, or a servant in the temple complex. You live in a time of abundance. The city is orderly. The streets are full. The ziggurat is busy with festivals and sacrifices. There is trade on the river, music in the courtyards, incense in the air. And yet, something has changed. The taxes are higher, the orders more complex, the officials more watchful. There are more envoys from other cities now, more soldiers, more messengers riding through in haste. There are more decrees posted in the temple gate, written in a legal style that is harder to follow. The king is still respected, but he is no longer often seen. There are whispers of unrest in the south, of a failed tribute shipment from Mari, of a city where the grain did not arrive. The great king Hammurabi still rules, but he rules now through layers, through governors and deputies and scribes who do not always interpret his word with clarity. The system holds, but only just. In his later years, Hammurabi withdrew further into administration. He reissued older decrees, reconfirmed boundaries, commissioned new shrines. But the outer regions began to resist. The south, always difficult, rebelled in small ways. Cities delayed tax payments. Priests rewrote ritual calendars to favor local gods over Marduk. And the problems were no longer easily solved. For every city that fell into line, another drifted out of it. The law code, once a symbol of unity, began to feel like something else, something heavier, something imposed. Its rules were clear, but life was not always so. The clauses written on the Great Stela, once a promise of order, now became a test of allegiance. Were you under Babylon's law or outside it? And if outside, what would happen next? The king aged. His son waited, and the balance trembled. Hammurabi's death, when it came, passed without great drama. There is no record of illness, no moment of abdication. The line of succession was clean. His son, Samsu-iluna, took the throne. The scribes updated the royal lists. Offerings were made, a hymn was sung. Something shifted. Not loudly, not immediately, but irrevocably. The south broke away, Uruk, Isin, Ur. Cities that had once pledged loyalty to Hammurabi's courts declared their independence. Their priests declared that Marduk was no longer supreme. Their scribes ceased copying Babylonian proclamations. Their granaries kept what they produced. Samsu-iluna marched to reclaim them. He burned cities, suppressed revolts, rebuilt walls. But it was not the same. The charisma was missing. The thread that had held the system together, that sense of careful attention, of deliberate justice, began to fray. And without that thread, the empire unraveled.
Imagine yourself descending a narrow staircase beneath the floor of a temple. The stone is worn smooth in the center, shaped by centuries of cautious feet. The air shifts slowly, a little cooler with each step. You move in silence. The passageway narrows, the light dims, your footsteps become muffled. Dust rises with each movement, disturbed only briefly, only slightly. And then the stairs end. You find yourself standing in a low rectangular chamber. The walls are made of baked brick, the ceiling supported by timber beams. In the far corner, a single oil lamp flickers, its flame breathing gently in the stillness. There is no furniture here, no shelves, no chairs, no writing desks. Pricey, just rows of baskets. Wicker, reed-bound, arranged in neat lines on the floor. Inside each one, stacked carefully, deliberately, with the rounded edges outward, are tablets. Clay tablets, hundreds of them, thousands perhaps. They do not shine, they do not glow, they do not beg for attention, aliyah. Akar makaduma. Some are wide and flat, others are small and thick, dense with writing. A few are cracked, many are still whole. Some are sealed in outer casings, clay envelopes that hide their contents until they are broken open. All are marked with cuneiform, the ancient script of wedge-shaped impressions. Each wedge is shallow, controlled, pressed with purpose into once soft clay. Some signs are familiar to trained eyes, names of gods, kings, cities, commodities. Others are obscure, variants of variants, phonetic puzzles, words preserved through tradition long after their meaning faded. You bend down, gently, you lift a tablet from the top of one basket. It is cool to the touch, slightly rough. It weighs more than you expect. And as you hold it in your hands, something occurs to you. Follow on. This is a voice, not a voice that shouts, not a voice that pleads, but a voice nonetheless. One that has waited silently for longer than your own language has existed. Mer Anna. It is not speaking to you, but you are listening. You have entered the quietest kind of library. In the ancient world, there were no books, there were no pages, no scrolls, at least not here. No paper, no parchment, no ink. The idea of a book, as we understand it, would not emerge for another 1,000 years, in another land. Bruce. But the idea of a library, that idea is much older. In Mesopotamia, the library began as an archive, not a place of learning, but a place of memory. Not public, but sacred, hidden, the property of temples, of kings, of the divine. The clay tablet was its vessel. At first glance, it seems crude. A lump of earth, flattened, scratched. But this simplicity is its genius. Because clay is everywhere. It needs no preparation. It welcomes the stylus. And most of all, it endures. You see, clay forgets nothing. Once dried, the tablet can last forever. It does not rot, it does not burn, it does not need to be copied or re-inked. It's buried properly, away from moisture, tucked inside a ruined chamber. It will outlive even the walls that once housed it. And so the scribes wrote. Nak, Laka, Laga. In cities like Uruk, Ur, Lagash, Babylon, Nippur, and Nineveh, they filled temple storerooms with clay. Darochach Choli, they wrote everything. Hymns, prayers, lexical lists, royal decrees, medical instructions, astronomical observations, legal cases, diplomatic letters, business receipts, debt records, omens, curses, myths. Each tablet a single breath of a civilization, and together a chorus. But unlike the great libraries of later ages, Alexandria, Pergamon, Rome, these Mesopotamian libraries were not designed to be read by many. They were not open. They were tools for scribes, priests, and royal bureaucrats. They were used to consult ritual instructions, to verify old contracts, to study old precedents. Lanumani, they were not just shells of knowledge. They were systems of continuity. Ramyana Ramya. The scribe in Mesopotamia held a role both practical and sacred. He was an administrator, yes, but also an intermediary between the past and present, between heaven and earth. To become a scribe, you trained from youth. You began by copying signs, then lists, then entire tablets. You memorized vocabulary in Sumerian, though by Hammurabi's time, Sumerian had long ceased to be a spoken language. Still, it was sacred, so it was preserved, just like Latin, many centuries later, Bolo Fram. Nanda, once trained, a scribe served many roles. You might work for the palace, tracking grain deliveries, recording rations, writing letters for diplomats. You might work in the temple, documenting rituals, copying incantations, drafting hymns, or you might be an independent contractor, writing contracts, property sales, and legal complaints for private citizens, paid per tablet. But wherever you worked, your tool was the same, the stylus. Usually a sharpened reed, sometimes wood or bone. The script you used was cuneiform, from the Latin cuneus, meaning wedge. Each sign was a combination of wedges, vertical, horizontal, diagonal, pressed into the clay in exacting sequence. There were hundreds of signs. Some represented sounds, others whole words. Many had multiple meanings depending on context. Some signs were inherited from older scripts, others were innovations. Some fell out of use and then reappeared centuries later. To write was to navigate a living system, and once written, a tablet might be stored, used, forgotten, or copied again. In time, a collection would form. A library. Let's return to that underground chamber. You set the first tablet aside. You reach for another. Mayem Shalom. This one is larger, heavier. The writing is dense, more than 100 lines, arranged in 2 neat columns. At the top, a familiar phrase, if a man to man. It is a legal code. Not Hammurabi's, an older one, perhaps from Meshnuna, or a local variant, but the structure is the same, a conditional clause followed by a consequence. If a man borrows a donkey and the donkey dies while in his care, then... The lines are not just laws, they are reminders, al-matumu. They tell the reader not what is right, but what is expected, what is known, what has precedent. Mera. They do not argue, they affirm. Mirati, mesrati, 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 and that affirmation is power, no sanon. To consult the library was not to explore freely, it was to verify, to anchor one's action in tradition, to speak with the voice of those who came before. The libraries did not answer questions, selud. They reminded you what had already been decided. Fichum, machan. There are many kinds of libraries, masha, lemi, leminil. Some are built for power, others for preservation. And some are hidden, not out of shame, but reverence, fear, or hope. The ruins of Nippur, an ancient religious capital of Sumer. Archaeologists uncovered one of the oldest known temple libraries. Its tablets were buried beneath the floor of the scribal school. There were hundreds, some intact, others in fragments, stored in clay jars or laid flat in niches. Why were they buried? Perhaps it was protection. The site was under threat, invaders, natural decay, changing politics, machish, or perhaps it was ritual. Because in Mesopotamian belief, a tablet was not merely an object. It carried voice, intention, divine connection. It could not be thrown away. If a text became obsolete, it could be broken. But even then, the fragments were buried in sacred ground. Kuntarir, a forgotten tablet, was not garbage. It was memory. And memory had weight. You can feel that in the layers. Non vint de ci la conce. Later scribes did not simply discard old texts. They copied them, preserved them, translated them when necessary, but rarely changed them outright. This is how myths endured, not because they were told again, but because they were written again. The story of Gilgamesh, for example, began as a series of Sumerian poems, short vignettes, a king, a journey, a flood, Kiterin. Over centuries, these fragments were compiled, adapted into Akkadian, expanded into epic form, coalesced, and the tablets. They were not merely recopied, they were studied, annotated, interpreted by generations of scribes, each layering their own understanding. One copy might have a damaged line, another a variant phrase, a third a missing stanza, alifoti. No one version was final. Each was part of the whole. The library, then, was not a container, but a conversation. A conversation conducted over centuries, in silence. Ashurbanipal understood this. He was a king of Assyria in the 7th century BCE, a time when empires rose quickly and collapsed even faster. But Ashurbanipal wanted more than military triumph. He wanted preservation. He called himself a scholar, a scribe king, and he ordered his envoys to gather texts from across the known world, from Babylon, from Nippur, from Uruk, from priests and scholars and temples. He demanded copies, originals, translations, ma. In Nineveh, he built rooms just for tablets, anicholi mani malala. Not temples, not tombs, rooms for thought. More than 30,000 tablets have been recovered from his palace library. They covered everything from medicine to mythology, astronomy to exorcism. Catalog nuva. Each was labeled, catalogued, stored by subject. Prosmore. There were even colophons, closing lines at the end of tablets where scribes recorded their names, their cities, the tablet's origin, and sometimes a curse. If anyone should alter the words on this tablet, may the gods strike him down. It wasn't simply superstition, it was a declaration. This knowledge is sacred, its form matters, its continuity must be protected. Ashurbanipal's library was vast, comprehensive, but it was not eternal. When the Assyrian Empire fell, Nineveh was burnt. The walls collapsed, the roofs turned to ash, the city became dust. Nyasha. But the tablets, they baked. Clay, exposed to intense heat, hardens, becomes ceramic. And so, paradoxically, fire preserved what time might have destroyed. Ashurbanipal's legacy survived not because it was protected, but because it was consumed. Ashurbanipal, his library was buried beneath the ruins. forgotten for over 2,500 years. And when it was found, the voice returned. Let's go back to the room. You're still sitting among the baskets. The light is softer now, the air drier. There's a kind of stillness in the space, a hush that seems to hum just beneath perception. You reach for another tablet. Blah, 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 blah. This one is different. Larger, curved. Its writing is finer, more compact. You realize as you begin to examine the surface that it is an astronomical record. Shu, shu. The signs are numbers, names of stars, months, cycles. Bus. It describes the movement of Venus. Tash, mil tash. 5 cycles. Over 8 years. Noted with care, each appearance and disappearance tracked according to the lunar calendar. Mante vitate. This is not casual stargazing, an automonoteur. It is structured observation. For the Babylonians, the heavens were not abstract, they were active, alive. The movement of the stars, the phases of the moon, the position of the planets, all were messages. Not metaphorical ones, but actual signs, omens. A scribe might spend decades recording the sky, every eclipse, every unusual conjunction, every irregularity, abdelinazi. These were entered into tablets and compared with older ones. Patterns were found, predictions made, melaslai, and from these predictions, decisions. Whether to plant, whether to travel, whether a king should declare war suvrata. In this way, the library did more than preserve the past. It shaped the future. Imagine now a day near the end. Not of a king or of a war, but of a library, a small one. In a temple, perhaps, near a river's bend. The city's name is known only faintly now, its syllables softened by time, half erased by the wind. The library is not grand. It has no golden seal, no marble pillars, just low walls, a dusty courtyard, a reed mat where the head scribe once sat cross-legged day after day, pressing lines into clay. And something has changed. The streets are quiet. The markets are closed. The temple gate is bolted. In the distance, smoke curls above the rooftops, thin, steady. But perhaps an army approaches. Perhaps the grain stores have run dry. Perhaps the king is dead and the gods are silent. Samraka. Inside the library, a junior scribe moves quickly, but not frantically. He stacks tablets in baskets, covering them with cloth. He places others in jars, wide-mouthed storage vessels, sealed with pitch. He writes no farewell. He leaves no scroll of explanation, but his gestures speak clearly. Hoidanimi, this knowledge must not be lost. He covers the door with earth, he seals the cracks with broken pottery, and he leaves. Lamni, Hanim, he does not return. No one does. The city falls. The temple collapses. The courtyard fills with sand. The river shifts its course. And the library sleeps for 2,000 years. When archaeologists began excavating sites like Nippur and Sipar in the late 19th century, they were not looking for libraries. They were looking for treasure. For temples, palaces, statues, things that would photograph well, that could be placed in museums, that would astonish donors, capcut. But what they found instead were tablets. Thousands upon thousands of tablets, piled, layered, broken, whole. At first they were dismissed, sold in crates, used as ballast for ships, traded, smuggled, ashla. But slowly some began to listen. Bolokoli, the signs were studied, translated, preserved, masked, and the libraries, though silent, began to speak again. Hashemi, they spoke not of heroes or kings, but of people. People who worried, who worked, who observed the sky, who counted sheep, who argued over debts, who wrote love poems, who wrote curses, who taught their sons the names of the stars. The rediscovery of these libraries reshaped our understanding of civilization. As por Fallon, we learned that writing was not invented for poetry, but for accountability. We learned that bureaucracy is older than myth. Art, natenhotovaci. We learned that memory, true memory, is something that must be written and rewritten and carried. Not just by one generation, but by many. Paco. Nutella. And so we return to the tablets. Kach, not the famous ones, housed behind glass in great museums, but the ones still resting in soil, in storage rooms, in drawers, in crates, marked with faded labels. Papat. Most of them have not yet been read, Machaskan. They sit in silence, waiting, Polakol. Not for us, exactly, but for someone, for anyone who will press stylus to clay again, even if only in the mind, and ask, what did you know? What did you fear? What did you hope would last? In the flickering light of a Mesopotamian temple, a scribe finishes his day's work. He smooths the edges of a new tablet, sets it aside to dry. He wipes his hands. He nods to the apprentice across the room. Vajaritos, kritos, pajaritos. Outside, the sun sinks low. The sound of reeds rustles in the canal. Somewhere nearby, someone is singing. A lullaby, perhaps, or a prayer. The scribe doesn't need to know the words. He's heard them before. Instead, he picks up another tablet. Not to write this time, but to read. A list of stars, a hymn, an omen. He traces the signs slowly, not with his stylus, but with his eye. He knows them, not as marks, but as meaning. He does not smile. He does not speak. But he knows he is not alone. Imagine that you are standing just outside a grand house in Babylon. The sun is low, the air thick and golden, the breeze slow moving through narrow streets. Dust settles gently on the clay walls of neighboring homes. A servant steps quietly from the doorway to scatter water across the ground, tamping down the dust before the evening begins. Tonight is no ordinary night. The house belongs to a wealthy landowner, a man of influence, not nobility in the royal sense, but powerfully positioned within the merchant and temple economies. Grain, dates, textiles, and livestock pass through his ledgers. His family has served in priestly roles for generations. His name carries weight, and so do his invitations. You have been invited. Not to dine as an equal, but perhaps as a guest of interest, a minor official, a favored scribe, or simply a witness to the ritual of power. The outer gate is modest, wood-bound with bronze, set into a wall of sun-baked brick. It opens without noise. The courtyard inside is shaded by date palms, and a lattice of reeds strung with cloth. A basin of water reflects the orange sky. A boy sits beside it with a bronze pitcher, waiting to pour water over the guest's hands. This washing is not just custom, it is ritual. Cleanliness in Babylonian society was not aesthetic, it was sacred. Especially before entering a house where gods are honored, where food will be blessed, and where omens are consulted. The boy tips the pitcher, and warm water spills over your fingers. A servant presses a cloth into your palm. The scent of sesame oil lingers faintly in the air. Inside, the walls are smooth plaster of a mud brick, cool, dim. A corridor leads to an inner courtyard where the dinner will take place. The space is open to the sky. Torches will be lit soon, but for now, soft light still fills the air. A low platform rises along one side where the host will recline. Cushions are already arranged. Tables, small portable trays of carved wood, sit nearby, ready to receive food and drink. Other guests are arriving. Hala. They speak quietly, respectfully, in low Akkadian murmurs. Some wear fine linen robes, others are in wool, softer, thinner than that worn by laborers. Rings glint on fingers, a few carry seals, cylindrical stone stamps strung on cords around their wrists, used to mark tablets, to prove their identity and status. Their conversations are measured, no one laughs loudly, there is talk of contracts, of shipments, of omens. A scribe mentions a new alignment of stars. A priest nods solemnly, offering no opinion, only recognition. The host emerges. His robe is dyed a pale saffron. The scent of frankincense clings faintly to him, not overwhelming, but present, like a memory. His hair is neatly oiled, his beard trimmed and slightly curled at the ends. This grooming too is not indulgence, it is part of the image. An orderly man is a blessed man, one favored by the gods. He greets each guest with a gesture of the hand and a single word, Hospitality is not excessive. It is smooth, confident, controlled.
You are led to a place near the lower table.
Not the lowest. This is not a dishonor, but not high enough to mark you as equal. Just close enough to observe, close enough to be remembered. A servant passes with a bronze pitcher filling shallow ceramic cups with beer, thick, cloudy, and mildly sour, brewed with barley and dates. Straws of reed are offered. The beer contains sediment, and the reed lets you drink only the upper liquid. The first toast is not announced. It is implied.
A host raises his cup. Others do the same. You follow. The movement is small, unhurried. Horsar.
No one drains their cup. A sip is enough. Then the food begins to arrive. Small plates first, lentils cooked with garlic and coriander, onions stewed in sesame oil, fresh bread soft inside and browned from the oven's wall, a dish of cucumbers in brine, all laid out carefully, portioned with intention. Each dish is placed not directly in front of the guest, but near them, inviting sharing, quiet exchange, measured conversation. No forks. No knives, only hands and pieces of bread, torn into small bites and used to gather food. A servant steps forward with a clay bowl, larger this time. It contains a stew, thick and fragrant, lamb likely, simmered with leeks and dates, touched with cumin and coriander. The scent is rich but not overpowering. It is served first to the host, then passed with care along the platform. You are given a portion on a flat bread laid across a shallow plate. Warmth rises from it. You eat slowly. Chalin, mevach, this is not a feast for indulgence. It is a ritual. And though there are no prayers spoken aloud, the structure of the meal carries memory, of offerings, of the temple, of the gods who first taught humanity how to cook and how to serve. In Babylonian tradition, the table is a model of the altar. To feed well is not only to honor the guest, but to imitate the divine. You glance around. The conversation has softened further. There is music now, a soft, persistent rhythm played on a small drum. A woman's voice hums, not a song with words, but a tonal line, almost like breath. There is a stringed instrument, a lyre, with a gentle twang, and the sound blends seamlessly with the quiet murmurs of the courtyard. Another round of dishes arrives. Boiled eggs. A plate of pomegranate seeds. More bread, this time spiced with crushed dates and honey. The beer is refilled. A servant offers water, and it is accepted without remark. In one corner of the courtyard, an old man begins to speak. Not loudly, his voice is barely raised above the music. But the others fall still. The rhythm of spoons, of swallowing, of shifting cushions, pauses. He speaks of a dream he had the night before, of a bull rising from the river, of a flame that flickered but did not consume. No one interrupts, no one questions. A priest sitting nearby listens, then replies in slow, measured tones. He offers no interpretation, only reference. There is a tablet, he says, from the temple of Marduk. It speaks of bulls in flood water. I will consult it. That is enough. No decision is made, no omen drawn. But the words have been recorded, if not in clay, then in memory. Later, a scribe may write them down. This is how information moves in elite Babylonian circles, through soft declarations, through shared language, through symbols understood by those who've been trained to listen. The meal continues. And still, no one rushes. Babylon is an old city. Its people are practiced in the art of time. Torches are lit. Not suddenly, not all at once, but one by one, like stars emerging against the twilight sky. Their flames catch gently, flickering without urgency. Light spills across the courtyard, soft and golden, playing against the clay walls and the smooth plaster. You notice how the faces around you have softened, not with intoxication, but with ease. The heat of the day is gone now. The scent of the night air carries traces of cooling brick, of oil,
of distant smoke from temple fires, still burning in the heart of the city, Omatar. Someone laughs, not loudly, just a breathier exhale at the end of a quiet remark. There is a second round of drinking, though not to excess. This is not a drunken revelry of lower taverns or harvest festivals. This is more deliberate, controlled. A man pours a finer beer, thicker and darker than the first. Its taste is richer, more complex. Someone nearby mentions a trader who brought the grain from the upper Tigris. That too is part of the meal. Provenance. A thing is more valued when its story is known. Happy. The conversation turns again. Proverbs are more than entertainment. They're a kind of social glue. To speak in proverbs is to signal education, familiarity with scribal tradition, a subtle game of verbal status. You listen carefully, perhaps offering one of your own, careful to choose a saying just obscure enough to impress but not confuse. This is not mere dinner, it is performance, an offering of intellect, of etiquette, of cultural memory. Support. Every movement, every word carries intention. And above it all, the host remains steady. He eats little now. He listens more than he speaks. His eyes move gently across the courtyard, checking for signs of discomfort, of boredom, of opportunity. A man of wealth in Babylon must always be attuned, not to gossip, but to balance, and de Venise. To host well is to signal control. Too much generosity, and one appears insecure. Too little, and one appears stingy. But just enough. Food that satisfies but does not burden. Music that soothes but does not distract. Conversation that flatters without becoming flattery. This is power. Power, not in conquest, but in stillness. In the ability to hold attention without demanding it. Aan die yogevel, a servant appears with a shallow tray. On it, small bowls of fruit, figs, grapes, and dried apricots, slices of melon, their juices glistening, pieces of soft cheese aged in clay jars with a tangy scent and smooth texture. This is the final course. Kat. Not a conclusion, but a tapering, a soft descent from the ritual of the meal toward the quiet of night. Kilukachas. The musicians adjust their rhythm. The lyre slows. The singer hums lower, drawing the tones downward as if gently easing the room into a resting place. The torchlight glows warmer against the clay, casting the guests into amber relief. Corina, Corina, Corina. Conversation fades to murmurs. A few guests rise to stretch. A boy fans away flies with a palm frond. Another pours water into the basin at the courtyard's edge. The ritual of departure begins before anyone announces it. But before the guests go, one final moment remains. Ta. A priest stands, slowly, with no ceremony, no prompting. Lumifa. He carries with him a small tablet, clay damp and freshly pressed. He lifts it into the torchlight, and the host nods slightly. The musicians pause. In low, deliberate Akkadian, the priest recites a prayer. Mande, Mande. It is not long, not loud, but it is ancient. It calls upon the gods of the household, of fire, of thresholds, of sleep. It invokes blessings for health, for harmony, for silence, not in abundance, but in measure. The gods of Babylon were not generous without purpose. They valued stability over excess. The tablet is placed at the foot of the shrine, just a small raised niche in the courtyard wall. Within it sits a figurine, barely the height of your hand, Marduk, or perhaps a local spirit, carved of terracotta and smoothed by years of incense smoke. For Bo Day, the prayer seals the evening. There are no toasts, no applause, only breath. And then the guests begin to leave, one by one, with words of thanks, with subtle bows, with gestures that carry no drama, only grace. You rise when it is time. A servant brings your sandals. Another pours a trickle of water over your fingers once more. The door opens again. The night awaits. Shula Saul. The stars are brighter now. The heat is gone. The city hums low like a drum heard through the walls. And behind you the courtyard returns to quiet. Tomorrow the servants will clean. The trays will be stored, the tablet will dry, and the memory of this dinner will settle into the house's walls like incense. Not special, not rare, just remembered. Imagine staying behind, not as a guest, not as a servant, but as someone unseen, a shadow in the corner. You linger as the courtyard empties, long after the bowls are cleared and the lyre strings go silent. Machler, the house exhales. The torches are lowered, some extinguished. The courtyard, once golden and lively, fades into soft darkness. A breeze stirs the hanging reed curtains. You hear water dripping into the basin, slow, steady, the same rhythm as breath during sleep. Servants begin their quiet work. They gather dishes with smooth, practiced hands. No clatter, no scrape. Everything is wrapped, wiped, and carried away with care. As Planstom, these are the invisible stewards of the elite home, men and women born into service or bought into it. Not slaves in the harshest sense, but bound by obligation. Some were born here, some arrived as children from distant provinces. Some were given in payment for debts. Others, the illegitimate children of distant cousins or disgraced clients. They know the house better than the host. They know the courtyard's patterns, which cushion is too soft, which plate has a slight crack, which guest eats quickly and which dips bread too slowly in oil. They know, too, when to disappear. In elite Babylonian homes, invisibility was a virtue among the serving class. The more smoothly things occurred, the more successful the evening. The perfect dinner was one where no servant was ever noticed, only felt through the seamless motion of food, drink, comfort, and care. But when the guests are gone, the roles reverse. The servants speak now, in hushed tones. They joke. They recount the moment when the host nearly spilled his cup. They mimic the stiff posture of the priest from Sipar. They laugh, but softly. Halashimin, they will sleep soon, in a separate part of the house, a windowless room behind the kitchen, near the storage jars. Shmat. But first, one of them lifts the tablet that was placed beneath the shrine. She holds it with both hands respectfully and carries it toward the back of the house, where a small bench and stylus sit beside a cooling kiln. She will record the final lines of the night. A name, a time, a phrase from the blessing. Minach Chachma. The tablet may dry in the air, or it may be fired in the kiln for permanence. It depends. Some prayers are meant to fade. Tatunatanaka. Others are meant to endure. Come on, come on, come on, come. Elsewhere in the house, the host has retired. His private rooms are simple. A bed raised slightly on wooden legs, its mattress stuffed with wool. A chest containing spare robes. A seal wrapped in cloth and kept in a niche. A low bench with tablets of accounts. Grey note to the temple, silver promised by a cousin, oil shipments expected from the north. He is not a king, but he carries responsibilities like one. Mastasim stays. Tomorrow he will sit with scribes and review the contracts drafted after the meal. Though nothing was signed tonight, decisions were made, words exchanged, hints offered. Manshotu. That is the purpose of dinner. Not indulgence, but arrangement. You do not threaten a rival. You feed him. You do not demand a contract. You inquire how his daughter finds the climate here. You do not ask for a loan. You offer praise for his guest gift, and note how beautiful the lapis seal appears in torchlight. Under. This is diplomacy, written in gesture, and the host is fluent. As he settles into his sleeping mat, he breathes deeply. The incense still lingers faintly in the air, sweet but not cloying. The linen of his robe is cool against the heat of the day, still radiating faintly from the walls. He does not dream of conquest or riches. He dreams, perhaps, of a stable household, of contracts honored, of granaries full. Outside, Babylon is quiet, not silent, never silent, but softened. Taschan, you can hear the river, faint and far, moving through the darkness like a god humming to himself. Rakmach, you can hear a dog barking in the distance. You can hear wind rustling through the date palms, dry and rhythmic, like a whisper repeating itself with each branch it touches. Somewhere, deep in the temple precincts, a watchman sings a line from an old hymn. a lullaby to no one, a memory kept alive by repetition. Mahal. And in a dozen other houses across the city, other dinners are ending. Shamunov. Some are modest, others are lavish. But all follows the same rhythms, shtochotoch, rituals of eating, of speaking, of remembering the gods. Rituals that do not only reflect power, but shape it. The elite of Babylon did not rule by decree alone. Atira, they ruled by tone, by placement, by invitation. Asal, who sat where, who received the best cut of lamb, who was permitted to speak of omens. These were not accidents. Lamunali, they were decisions, enforced not with spears, but with silence. By now the city is sleeping. Not all of it. Babylon never fully slept, but enough. The markets are dark. The palace gates are closed. The temples hum with embers, not voices. Only the river keeps its endless pace, winding silently past fields and gardens, past walls and reeds. In one part of the city, near the canal that feeds the temple district, another house stirs. It is smaller than the first, less formal, but its courtyard too has just hosted a dinner, Shelemiota. Not for elites in robes of linen, but for temple musicians and lower officials, for scribes in training, for overseers of barley fields and granaries, people who serve the system, who maintain it, but do not define it. Their dinner is simpler, the beer is thinner, the bread coarser, the meat, if any, comes in scraps, not cuts. The fruit is seasonal, not imported. There is no priest with a tablet, no shrine at the wall's edge, but the ritual is there, in quieter form. They eat by torchlight, they recline on mats, they speak in turns, measured, respectful. Finimil, they tell jokes, old ones, borrowed from Sumerian proverbs. They remember ancestors. And at the end, one of them sings. Not a hymn, not an incantation, Samon Darun Torros, just a song about the river. And the way it runs between things, through fields, through cities, through time. Someone begins to beat a rhythm on the table. Da! Another joins in with a hum of harmony. Lan, and for a moment the courtyard fills with something lighter than memory. Suchar, konteria, something like breath. Even in the most powerful homes, even in the most opulent quarters of Babylon, the trappings of wealth could not hide the essential truth. Every dinner was an offering. To the gods, to reputation, to continuity, sochivor. What you served and how you served it was not just a reflection of wealth, but of order. A man who kept his table in balance might keep his estate in balance. A host who remembered the names of servants and guests alike might be favored by the gods of speech and ritual. A dinner might determine who married whom, who partnered with whom, who betrayed whom. There were no speeches, no formal declarations, but there were glances, silences, choices. To accept a second bowl of stew was to agree. To remain quiet after a proverb was to dissent. To ask for water too early was to signal impatience. To stay too long was to be noticed. And everyone knew Sila, not through law, but through reason. Back at the first house before dawn, the kitchen is lit once again. Servants move carefully, quietly. The cook stirs embers in the hearth. A pot is set to boil. Bread dough is rolled out, slapped into shape, pressed to the side of the oven. Katai. The house must wake before the master. Courtyard is swept. The cushions fluffed, the reed mats shaken out. Calicus, no trace of last night's meal remains, except the scent of oil, faint on the floor tiles, and the single prayer tablet drying on a ledge near the window. The scribe will return today to collect it. It will be stored in a chest, wrapped in cloth, and placed in a small niche in the family archive. If the house endures, it may remain there for centuries. If not, it may survive still, buried beneath clay and ash, waiting to be uncovered. When archaeologists find the remains of Babylonian elite homes, they do not find treasure. Makalomanar. They find trash pits, drainage systems, broken cooking pots, charred grains, traces of soot on oven walls, bowls stained with oil, dishes worn smooth at the edges. Vaspasan. And sometimes, if they are lucky, they find a room with tablets. The tablet fausant. Not libraries, rare in private homes, but bundles of legal records, receipts, marriage contracts, name lists, inheritance disputes. And once in a while, a small prayer. Nothing grand, chewed. Just a few lines scratched into a clay plaque. An offering to a household god, a request for protection, for the safety of children, for the health of an aging parent, for peace in the home. For us, and these tablets are rarely displayed in museums. They are too plain, too quiet. But in their quietness, there is life. Not the life of kings, but the life of those who cooked the meals, poured the beer, folded the linens, arranged the cushions, and remembered the words of the gods by heart. And so the elite dinner ends, not with a flourish, but with silence. With the flicker of a dying torch, with the scent of bread rising again in the morning oven, with a servant whispering a prayer not meant to be heard, Katama, with a host who opens his eyes at dawn and forgets for just a moment the weight of his name, and with you, still imagining, still walking through the courtyards of the past, where memory is not just preserved, it is tasted, and where power is not shouted, but served. The night is long now, and Babylon has faded into quiet. The dinners have ended, the torches have gone out, the temples, once filled with song and smoke, lie still in the darkness. Only the wind moves, brushing across broken brick, between the bones of doorways, across the places where stories once lived. You've walked a long way tonight, through dust-choked alleys and stifling courtyards, past tax collectors and scribes, through shadows cast by ziggurats and law codes. You sat at the tables of kings and beneath the oil lamps of the poor. You've read prayers pressed into clay and heard stars interpreted like sentences in the sky. Still, somehow, Babylon remains quiet. Not gone, not erased. Just folded beneath the world that came after. You see, the people of Babylon are not waiting to be remembered. They were never forgotten. Every tablet unearthed, every boundary stone, every baked fragment of a prayer or a contract or a dream carries a voice. And those voices, so calm, so certain in their repetition of duties and rituals and observations, still reach us. Not to warn, not to astonish, just to be heard. Their days were not ours. Their gods are not ours. Their cities rose and crumbled and turned back into clay. Man more. But still, there is something familiar, isn't there? The way the clerk hoped for shade. The way the scribe scratched one more line before sleep. The way a host glanced across his guests and wondered who would still be loyal come morning. The way someone, somewhere, watched the stars and whispered a name no one else remembered. And so we leave them now, not in drama but in peace. Let the city sleep. Let the tablets rest, let the river run, unseen and unchanged, and let yourself drift backward, out of Babylon, out of the past, and into the stillness of your own night. The gods are quiet now, the lamps are out, the record has been made. And that is enough. Good night, dear dreamer.